I'm better off a bitch than just your little mouse. Cage dogs are always the most loud.
Hey y'all, welcome to the Scarlet A podcast, your soon-to-be favorite podcast on aborting the patriarchy and the legal culture that will just not let go of it. I'm Emma, a millennial mom, artist, and a constitutional law nerd with a background in civil litigation. You can follow me at e.v.l.woman on Instagram and Threads, and TikTok, for now, and at evilwoman, EVLwoman, no dots on Blue Sky. Be sure to subscribe and follow the podcast at Scarlet A Pod on Instagram, YouTube, and Spotify. Please also check out my Substack, Evil Woman Archives, at evlwoman.substack.com for more depth if you like my yapping. Huge shout out to Gwen Levy for the amazing music for this podcast with her song, Don't Have to Be. Please follow and support her work at Gwen Levy Music. I have a link to her GoFundMe in the description and in my bio should you wish to support a wonderful independent artist and women's rights activist. And with that, let's dig our heels in.
Ariella joins me today as one of my favorite social media creators. A superb focus on meaningful calls to action and political involvement. Thank you so much for being on. I want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself and your content before we start digging in.
Thank you for having me. So I call myself an anti-Doomerism person. That didn't entirely make sense, but I am very against the concept that the world is going to end tomorrow, and when everyone spreads that, it makes people more anxious and less willing to do the work. So I decided to do the complete opposite. And so I focus on what's going well, what's working, what we're doing right, and what people are working to help us do those things correctly and to save the world. And I think that has more of an impact than I ever imagined it could have.
Yeah, for sure. It's a definitely a fantastic balance between how much bad news that we're inundated with on social media and the news these days. We need that news to stay informed of what's going on, but we also need the energy, the optimism, just the good news that just doesn't get reported on because it doesn't get the same outrage momentum that everything else does. So major appreciation for that. I wanted to brainstorm what you think based on your past experience and just as you work through this, what might motivate people to both act on an individual and a collective level to stay more civically engaged in a more meaningful way?
I think what motivates people is the idea that they can do something. I think when you just throw things at them saying this bad thing is happening and this bad thing is happening and this bad thing is happening, it's hard for people to think that they have any ability to do things about that. I've been really impressed with seeing how many people are posting, you need to call your elected officials, and how many people are doing it. There are a lot of people who are like, I've never done this before, but which is really incredible to see. And then I think, what I'm doing, I think the idea of spreading the good news means that people think, oh, I don't have to be catatonic. There is things that are moving forward. I have so many people message me saying, you're the reason I'm calling. I'm like thinking, well, but all I'm doing is posting good news, but that is needed to keep moving forward. And then also knowing what's happening. You need to be aware of what's going on. So like I have my newest series is every Tuesday is election day, which is going through all the elections that happen every Tuesday. So people just don't know they're happening, so they're not going to vote in them. So the more we lift up the things that are happening and the things we can do and the actionable items and the calls to action, the more likely people are to get involved.
Right. I think having even small wins based on those calls to action help keep the momentum going. It helps push the car forward. I feel like we're stuck in this like bumper to bumper traffic right now. And this doom and gloom is kind of hovering overhead because we all know what this could lead to and stuff. But just anything we can do to keep it going before we like freak out and want to just bang the steering wheel and set the car on fire and say, fuck it all, I don't care. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Having those action items and then good news in response to those action items. And even if it isn't the best news, it could be better news. So for example, if we had an election in a super heavy Republican district that we we would normally think there's just no hope for, why even go, right? But if you were to even get a close margin in that district, say it was a district that had a plus 20 for Trump in the last election, right? And we got it into a 2% margin. Even if we didn't win the election, it's like, no, that momentum was there. We didn't need to convince very many people to go. We continue to do that. We might be successful the next time.
We have that story. We have that story out of Virginia. That was one of the first elections once he was, or one of the first elections anyone cared about once he was elected. He wasn't in office yet. It was on January 7th. And it was State Senate District 10 in Virginia. And I think there were like 11 counties in that district, and like three, it's a very red district, and three of them went Dem. And so even though we didn't win the district, we got fairly close. I think it was the difference, but I think it went from 30 plus 34 to plus 19 or plus 17. Which obviously isn't that close, but when it comes to an election that small, we're talking about 1,000 votes, 2,000 votes.
Right.
And so, yeah. And then you see something like what happened in Iowa, State Senate District 35, where we went from a plus 21 Trump district to a plus 4 Mike Zimmer, the Democrat district.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And that, or we see even in states that we did really, like in Minnesota, in a really blue district that was plus 64 or 64% Democrat. But in the special election, it got to 91. So there are some incredible wins that we're experiencing now. And that's one reason I try to push people. So many people are like, there's never going to be elections again. It's not going to happen. Like, there are elections tomorrow. Like, there are so many elections tomorrow. And that.
Yeah, don't comply in advance. Vote while you can.
One of those is so important.
Yeah.
And turnout for those elections. If every mayorship that could go Dem did, if every city council seat that could go Dem did, if every school board race that could go Dem did, I mean, that would change everything. Like, people act like the only important things are at the national level, but all of these experiments that Republicans put in place started at state level. So it's our job to start moving it back and moving it forward at state level.
Yeah, we're going to be very reliant on the states too as they continue to gut those federal protections. That having as much of a stronghold at the state level as we can is going to be incredibly, incredibly important, because states still have a certain amount of sovereignty under our system. We have a very unique system where the states within it have, not the full sovereignty that the country does, but enough where there's enough precedent and there's enough general standing that they have authority over their area, over their communities. And so if we can build those strongholds, that's going to be a saving grace for us in the long run, even if it feels small right now.
Yeah, and not to mention the fact that it's really important to remember that majority of red states are not red states, they're non-voter states. There are places where the Democrats just think, I can't win, so why bother? But when it comes to a special election, when it comes to even Congress, like, we can always win. If our turnout is high enough, we can always win. And I feel like a lot of people don't understand that. I mean, we lost the House of Representatives by 7,642 votes. That is how many people had to vote that didn't. And with it that low, I can almost guarantee that there are people that voted top of the ticket and didn't vote anything else, and we would have flipped the House. And that is something I think a lot of people don't fully understand.
Yeah. I've been in the trenches of politics basically my entire life, because my mother was extremely involved as I was growing up. And the biggest thing was always, the number one complaint was always voter turnout, getting people to vote, getting people registered. And especially if the SAVE Act goes through, we're going to need to do a lot of groundwork, like boots on the ground activism needs to be getting people registered and ready to go. That way, when these elections come up every Tuesday, people don't have to worry that they're not registered. They don't have to worry that they're not allowed to vote in them, right? They can just be ready to go. And so depending on the outcome of this bill, I think that there's going to be a lot of work to do in ways to motivate people through, okay, well, let's get everything together. You know, I push a lot of information to people who don't think they're going to be affected by it, like sour cream white married women like me, who have changed their name since they were born and don't realize that they're now going to have extra hurdles if they don't already have a real ID or a passport to get registered to vote, because they think that these laws are targeted at immigrants, whatever else that they're trying to use to scapegoat and clamp down on, more voter suppression, because they know that they can't win without it. Like they have essentially admitted that. I mean, when Ken Paxton went on and said, yeah, we stopped millions of votes coming in from Texas that would have definitely flipped Texas. It's an admission. It's like, if we hadn't stopped that, then we wouldn't have won. I'm like, that's antithetical to democracy. If you know you're stopping something that's going to affect the trajectory of the way it's going, you are encroaching on that. I don't care how you try to justify it and say, well, we're trying to combat fraud. Well, we're trying to combat this. It's like, but yeah, I also think that one of the ways to kind of help motivate people is to hone in and kind of adjust to a more realistic set of expectations. And I think we're seeing a lot of people who, it may not be entirely faults of theirs. I mean, I don't think we have an adequate education system in terms of people coming out of high school understanding the complexities of the US government. I didn't understand some of the complexities until law school studies, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that people are just going to have access to. And so a lot of my content is based on trying to, give people a general understanding of what that entails so that their expectations can be adjusted. I've seen some wild hot takes out there about why aren't Democrats doing this? Why aren't these people doing that? And I'm saying they're not allowed to do that. That's not their role. That's not their this. This is how it needs to function. And then a lot of people who are like, well, why can't they operate outside of that role? Like the Republicans break the rules. Why can't they break the rules? So, well, that's all fine and good, but the Republicans are also the ones who will enforce the rules. So it's not like they're not going to enforce them on us if we break them, even though they're breaking them. Like they don't give a flying F about hypocrisy, So, yes.
That what I found is that when I say, can I swear?
Yeah, go for it.
When I say fuck you, you're wrong. I get pushback. When I say here is what the actual truth is, I get less pushback. And so what I found is that the one reason I started these two series, one reason I started 3 Wins today and Daily Dems doing the work, making noise and fighting back, is because I was just yelling at people saying, you need to focus on the Dems. You need to see what they're actually doing. Why aren't you looking at what they're doing? And instead, I now say, here is what they're doing. Take it or leave it. If you're not going to take it, then you're clearly don't want to actually know the truth. And that's your prerogative, I guess. So what I think that with social media, negative outrage works really well when it's negative. But if you're trying to get negative outrage for positive things, it doesn't work. But when you say, here is what is actually going on, spread this, I have a lot of support with that. And it might just be the way I speak. I mean, I know a lot of people are doing incredible work and they aren't going viral for it. And I am so eternally grateful that I am able to have this platform, because I know that that is not a given. But I find that if I post outrage, I get nowhere. If I post the facts with the factual information, I get somewhere. And I also find that one of the reasons I think that happens is because I call out people who spread disinformation and I call out people who spread misinformation in their own comments. And so, like, I'll go, a great example is there's this one account that posts a lot of news and did not post sources. Still doesn't really post sources, but didn't post, it just put quotes. And I was like, where is this from? And people in the comments were like, I didn't want to say it, but I'm really glad you did. And then some of them started following me from that. But what I found is that we are in a time when people are starved for knowing that what they are seeing is true. And so unlike typically where I was struggling to get views and struggling to get attention for doing this exact thing, people now want it. And so I think one of the ways to push through is that you just have to ignore the incorrect things in terms of your own post. I mean, commenting on them and correcting them is one thing, but making a whole post about it is where I was going wrong, because no one wants to be told they're wrong. And another thing is, it's easy to think of when you think of like the cult mentality and the idea that I can't get through to a culty Trump supporter by bashing their thoughts. The way I get through to them is by saying what's true and letting them find me. And again, I'm really lucky that they can find me. But I think that if more of us go that route, that instead of saying, fuck the people who say fuck the Democrats, you just say, here's what the Democrats are actually doing. Here's the good news. Follow this. Look at this. This isn't going viral and it needs to. Not, this isn't going viral and it needs to because you're a bad person, because you're doing the wrong thing, because then people are automatically on the defensive. And I think that's one way that we can change the narrative, and that I've had success with changing the narrative.
Yeah, no, that's terrific insight, because people do naturally gravitate toward a defensive mode. And that's something that I've learned in, mediation trainings and everything else, is like, you have to be careful about how you trigger people. You might think it's wrong that they get triggered. You might think it's outrageous. You might think whatever. You can set those aside and still realize that the fact of the matter is they're going to get triggered. And most people are uncomfortable admitting when they're wrong, especially in a public setting, even if that's on social media public setting, right? It's not necessarily their face. They have to be like, oh, sorry, I was wrong, like right here. But even if it's just a replying to a comment that says, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't look up all of the information about this first and it is misinformation. I mean, it takes courage and character to be able to own that and address it and correct it. And not everybody has the self-awareness to do that, even if their intentions are in the right place. And so I find that ways to communicate with people, just more pragmatic ways to communicate with people is really important. That sometimes we need to set our own anger and our own feelings aside. And if we have the ability to do that, a lot of people struggle with that, especially when they are really directly affected by something that's happening. Like I saw a creator whose child is severely impacted. His child is severely impacted by this stuff. And so even though he was a Harris supporter throughout the entire throughout the entire campaign, and still had criticisms over various policy and whatnot, as everybody is certainly allowed to, and I encourage that in a healthy capacity. That's not just building this outrage machine and eating each other over it. But he was saying, no, I need, like, my child's life literally depends on this. So when it all came crashing down and we got these severe losses, I can totally understand how that anger has funneled the way it has, and how it has become visceral anger toward Democrats, toward, not just obviously very viscerally angry toward Republicans who are actually doing it. But at that point, you start to, sometimes it's hard to control. And so I think the people who do have the ability to control it better, the people who can, not sink too far into the doomerism sort of sphere of things, I think we have an obligation to try to remain as level-headed as possible, and offset some of that anger that is just naturally going to roll around. We're not going to be able to control people. We're not going to be able to control how they feel and how they respond to this stuff, but we can control the messaging that we deliver. And I tell people, as much criticism as there is on the left-wing media machine, and how we really don't have one in comparison to the right-wing propaganda media machine, we are all part of that machine. Like, it's not just them. You can't just say they need to build a better one. They need to build a better one. They need to build a better one. The longer we keep pandering to, or the longer we keep treating them as a separate entity that needs to pander to us, that needs to just make us feel better, we're going to keep failing the assignment, in my opinion, if we don't kind of move into that and take the responsibility. Whatever advice you're giving to Democrats in terms of their media messaging, take your own advice, and push that. So if you wouldn't want Democrats coming on their social media platforms and just saying everything is over, we're never going to have elections again, blah 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 blah. If you wouldn't want to see that from AOC or Jasmine Crockett or Senator Murray or any of these other people, right? If you wouldn't want to see that from them, you'd be like, what the F are they doing? They're just killing hope. Then take your own advice and stop doing that yourself, So that's kind of where I'm at. We need that every like, every comment, every video, every share is going to build this media machine, especially when we're combating censorship from platforms that are run by the oligarchs, right? So we need to be very conscientious about that.
It's about, we have to go viral. And if we're not, it takes everyone to do that. It doesn't just happen with me. It doesn't just happen with these big creators, because I have posts. I've been posting these 2 series for 2 weeks now, and on TikTok it was doing really well, and now it's back to 1,000 views. Does that mean I'm not posting? Does that mean I've changed anything in my style from it getting 100,000 views to 1,000 views? Nothing. But it just isn't going anywhere, and the only way to change that is if it goes viral. And I have no power in making my posts go viral, and neither do any politicians or anyone else. I think it's really important also that that anything can go viral. So as much as that not everything will, you have to know that everything can. And I think it's very important for people who are just casually on social media or even influencers. You have the right to feel despondent. You have the right to feel doom and gloom, but you don't have the right to share it. And if you feel that way, create a private account. Create an account where you vent to your friends. Have a Zoom. Send an email. Write in your diary. But when you put it out into the world, you are adding to, as you said, you are adding to the narrative. And so really, we all have to be conscious of what we're willing to add to the narrative. I have a really hard time with not getting worked up. And I see something, a comment on my post, I try to respond to it. It doesn't go well. I literally tense up and start screaming. And I'm screaming into my phone because I usually talk instead of type. And the person who I'm replying to isn't hearing me scream. They're just seeing the response I'm writing that's already pissing me off. And it's so I really put a conscious effort. There's someone who I'm currently replying to that is a Trump supporter. And I'm asking, are you okay with what Elon Musk is doing? Are you okay with this thing and this thing? And they're trying to tell me that Hunter Biden had brought cocaine into the White House. I'm like, no, there was no cocaine dealer in the White House during Biden, but there was during Trump. We have proof of that. And so I'm like trying to talk to them. And at some point, I'm going to be like, look, we do not see eye to eye right now. I know I am just one person. I hope you consider what I'm saying. I hope there are other people in your life that start to give you more things, because it takes about 5 people for you to start thinking, maybe I'm not right. I know you're not willing to say you're wrong right now, but I hope you just think about what I say and have a good day. And that is probably the biggest power we have, is to be able to have a conversation like that.
I agree. I think that is the biggest power we have. And we have, I was cracking up my last mediation panel last week on Friday, before I got my certification. And there's about 30 people there. And just in the discourse of chatting about everything that's going on, it was very clear to me that everybody at the table was a Democrat or left-leaning, probably more progressive, further on the progressive end than centrist for the most part. And I was thinking to myself, I was like, what are the chances of that? I mean, I know this is Los Angeles, right? And so everything's going to be skewed that way, but not one person who was like, raw, coming in right winger. I mean, I have seen plenty of mostly moderate Republicans in my career in law, especially in business litigation, because there's Republican attorneys, right? Most of them aren't rabid Trump supporters, but you know what I mean? They're still conservative leaning. And I'm thinking, this is a mediation panel. This is something where people actually have to learn and appreciate the power of empathy to get anything done when they're trying to resolve disputes between people. I was like, that's almost like that's not even something that Republicans, for the most part, or in the conservative wing of this country, even consider as a valuable tool. We have this whole thing coming out about how empathy is a sin from the right wing. They don't want anything to do with it. I think it makes them feel uncomfortable. They conflate it to a feeling instead of a skill, et cetera, et cetera. But I think people on the left wing, they understand empathy a bit better. Like, I don't think you can cultivate the kind of compassion you do for marginalized groups if you don't have the ability, some ability for empathy, right? And since we have that ability and it's a skill that you need to practice to get good at, I feel like we do have an obligation to use it, and to use it across the aisle, to use it in our relationships, to diffuse some of the tensions, instead of dropping off people who, there are going to be some people that are total lost causes you probably shouldn't waste your energy on, especially if it makes you ultra angry. It derails you from, derails your energy that could be channeled into better things. But if you have that ability, I think you should use it. And so I think the ability to just be able to be like, okay, I'm going to set my feelings aside, try to stay calm and centered, try to understand why this person is coming at me this way. And then we can kind of navigate from there. I think that is your best bet to defer to, even when you want to get viscerally angry. Like I tell people all the time, especially now just watching the left wing just go into chaos, which is exactly what they want. Because the weakness of their strategy, Ezra Klein did a thing on this, the weakness of their strategy is that it quickly builds unity among all the people impacted by the flood of executive orders and just the gutting of these federal administrations and everything else. It creates that unity. Even some people from the MAGA side are switching over, right? It rapidly builds that unity. And if they're not careful about how rapidly that builds, now you have a huge coalition of people who may not see eye to eye on everything, but they know that they want you out, right? So that is the biggest flaw of their strategy. And we are like doing it, we're helping them through just eating each other. So I tell people, if we had won every branch of government, if we had every branch of government under our control right now, and we were just watching the right wing eat each other, police each other, eat each other, they can't get the right message across, we wouldn't have to worry about them. They'd be taking care of themselves, and we could steamroll through everything else that we wanted to do. And so from putting it in that perspective, it's like, okay, yeah, I get what you're saying. Like we need to kind of set aside some of our political differences, even on the left wing, because it's just such a diverse coalition of people, and build the momentum to oppose the other side. And we have a great opportunity that if we are going to channel the outrage is there, the anger is there. And I do believe in at some point you need to vomit it. You can't keep suppressing it, right? If you're going to vomit it, direct it at the right wing. Right. They have every branch of government right now. Channel all your anger that way. If your post is going to blow up because you're basically screaming at your phone and just you're really capitalizing on that outrage machine, channel it at the right. Because if it goes viral, and some MAGA people see it that might be on the cusp of coming over. I mean, I think all the time about what people on the right must be thinking if they were to enter the algorithms that we see and just see how much we hate Democrats, like collectively, they'd be like, oh, why would I vote for them if apparently they're so bad even amongst their own, you know what I mean? Like they feel like they had nowhere to go. So our messaging matters, their messaging matters, but we need to work together to create that media machine. And so focusing on better communication between each other, and the messaging that we try to get across through the post, I think is super, super critical. And that we need more of the kind of content that you put out in terms of good news, wins, what the Democrats are doing, whether or not you think they're doing enough or whatnot. Here's what they are doing, because most of it is in the dark.
Yeah. And I think the best example is when Ken Martin became the chair of the DNC. In 5 minutes, everyone was like, he's terrible. He had done nothing. He had said nothing except maybe a couple interviews that just were a little didn't have the energy they wanted. He was saying the right thing, but he didn't have the energy. everyone ignored Ben Wickler saying, you know what? I'm really happy for him because my strategy was from him. I learned what I do from him. And then over the course, people kept like saying it's the same thing because he was the vice chair before. Obviously, it's business as usual because, of course, vice chairs have all the power in the world. It kept being this whole thing. It's he's the elite, he's the status quo. Everyone who's status quo voted for him. I'm like, but Hakeem Jeffries, Pelosi, and Schumer all endorsed Wickler. So wouldn't you want the person that wasn't endorsed by them if your issue is the status quo? And then we started seeing Malcolm Kenyatta posting about local elections. We started seeing their version of Daily Dems doing the work. And then you see the comments on that and saying it's not enough. And I'm thinking, you just wanted something to be outraged about. But what we're seeing is this is not the DNC of a month ago. This is a very new DNC with a very new strategy that I've never seen before from the DNC. I've seen a 50-state strategy. I've never seen a local strategy. If what they're doing is local, that's different. If Malcolm Kenyatta is going to be posting these videos, that's different. If David Hogg is going to be posting these wins, that's different. Like, these are different things. And it was this automatic day of, this is bad. I haven't seen anything yet, but I've already decided this is bad. And that's, I think, one of the things that Democrats love to do is, I don't know what's actually going to happen, but I've already decided it sucks. I don't have any idea of what's going to happen. I don't have any idea of what's going to be done. I already don't like it. And I'm going to tell everyone in the world about it. And that's where we fail. And I think, I mean, that's one thing that I think I'm combating with my series is that, and I think one of the ways I do this series is I don't post bad news unless it has a call to action attached to it. So you're not going to see on my account about a lawsuit that went the wrong way. You're not going to see on my account the newest executive order because there is nothing we can do about it. And what I find is when there's nothing you can do, all you feel is hopeless. And so if there is one place that you can go where everything posted is either good news or there is an actionable item attached to it, that's a different story. And that's what I try to emulate, and that's what I try to create, and that's what I try to make space for.
Yeah, no, and it works. I tried out that strategy. Most of my carousel posts, I mean, my account used to be almost exclusively reproductive rights and justice focused. That was my niche up through trying to shift into campaign mode. And then now in the Trump era, and I'm like, is it going to be illegal to talk about that stuff soon? I don't know, but I'm trying to position myself in a way to pivot toward other things that aren't going to be illegal necessarily to talk about while still focusing on those. But it definitely shifted. I mean, I changed my username, everything else. It has definitely been a new platform from there. But my carousel posts have always gotten a pretty average amount of likes. I mean, I haven't had more than 2,500 followers for more than a few months, and I've been doing this for a few years now, right? So it took me a while to get somewhere. But I had one where I was just absolutely going bonkers over how many people thought that the congressional Democrats could do something about the executive orders. And I was like, in my head, it just seemed like an intuitive thing. Like, when he started coming out with all the executive orders, even when they knew that like there was going to be hundreds of executive orders coming out on his first day and everything, or first week or whatever they had, that they had planned them in advance to have him just sign off on everything. I was going, like, depending on what's in these, what we suspect is going to be in these, like, my brain immediately went to, I think the ACLU has lawsuits prepared. They're going to need to modify them in terms of when the order actually gets published and stuff, but they're ready to go in certain contexts. And they're not the only advocacy groups. There's a handful of others too. But when I started seeing, well, why can't congressional Democrats override the executive order? And I was like, oh no, I need to do a civics lesson because this is, I mean, I guess I understand why people don't realize that that's just like a total impossible hurdle at this point. But the way you combat an executive order is going to be different from the way you combat legislation introduced in Congress is going to be different from the way you combat nominations, right? Because we're looking in different arenas here. And so I had made a post about how, one, executive orders are not law. He's not changing the law. They're supposed to operate within what the law has currently been established as. He's clearly not doing that. And if Congress wants to do something about it, they need to pass legislation that prevents them from doing it. Even if they pass that legislation with a bare majority, and say they get some Republicans on their side to pass it with a bare majority, it's still going to land on the president's desk. The president that just made the executive order is going to veto it, meaning now you need a supermajority to override that veto. That is an impossible hurdle at this point in this Congress. That's not going to happen even if Democrats operated in lockstep. So there was like a video of a creator that I normally really like just saying, well, why aren't they the ones initiating the lawsuits? And I'm like, well, Congress can't initiate the lawsuits. Right. That's not something they have standing to do. And so I kind of, added the post, this is not something this is not a ball in Congress's court, but this is a ball that was in the court of legal advocacy groups that actually represent either clients or the group itself has standing to file a complaint in the federal court system. And attorney generals, yes, attorney generals too. And so if you want to start diverting if you're really frustrated with Democrats, let's say, or you just don't feel like it's, some of your favorite senators are in their seat for 4 more years or something like that, or they just got elected. If you are wanting to divert your funds, especially since a lot of us on the left aren't rich, we're no Elon Musk who can just dump a bunch of money into these campaigns, donating to attorneys general, donating to the legal advocacy groups. So I put together, I spent 2 days scouring all of the lawsuits, trying to figure out who the judges were, which legal advocacy groups were spearheading it, what appellate courts they would go to when they're inevitably appealed, to see if they're, if they're going to the Fifth Circuit, that's going to be very different from going to the First Circuit, right? And so I did a deep dive. I didn't go much into the substance of the lawsuits themselves, like talking about the legal issues with it. Because I was just going to be way too much time. It was more just like, this was the game strategy of it. And it was phenomenal because 28 of the 37 that had been filed, there's probably more as of now, but of the 37 that were filed at the time that I made the post, 28 of them were in front of a democratically appointed judge. Only 3 of them were in front of a Trump appointed judge. And then 1 already has ruled against him, even though it was one of his appointed judges. And of the appellate courts, only 2 of them would go to, and they're not in currently, they're still in a district court, but they would go to an appellate court that had a slight Republican leaning. So the 7th Circuit has a slight Republican leaning. It's still not like the 5th Circuit or one of the others. But all of the others would be going to, a couple would be going to a full Democratic appointed appellate circuit, right? They were very strategic about that. As somebody who understands civil procedure, that is something you look at when you look at the jurisdiction and whatnot. And so me pointing out that I'm very impressed by how quickly they got those out, by the strategy around doing it. And then people will say, and then I got a comment from somebody saying, you're probably the only person out there who's actually impressed with the Democrats. And I'm like, I'm not even talking about the Democrats right now. I'm talking about the legal advocacy groups, but I put that post together that just said, okay, this is a breakdown of what's going on here, just to kind of recenter your focus and give you some realistic expectations. And then, I had put together a longer Substack on it that had links to donate to like 2 to 3 dozen legal advocacy groups that are doing the work. So adding in that call to action, even when you're correcting people, can also have a good impact, because that's one of the best performing carousels that's really content heavy, like really text heavy carousels that I've had in a while. And so I'm trying to do that more from the legal side of things. So it's just more of my niche. Yeah. But it does make a difference. Like people don't like to be told they're wrong. And I'm not trying to come after people and say, you're dumb. I can't believe you didn't understand how this works. I do understand how most people don't understand how that works. Like I get where that comes from. But when you get corrected on that, or when you get the information you need to better understand it, take it and use it instead of just trying to dig the hole deeper. And don't drag down these legal advocacy groups and these attorneys general for doing the work just because you're mad at the congressional Democrats for not doing the work. You know what I mean?
And also
So,
the idea that they're not doing it fast enough. It's been 3 weeks. I mean, people really don't understand that 3 weeks is not a lot of time. And if you want a really solid court case and a really solid lawsuit, some of them are still coming out because it needs to be more solid than what can be done in a day. And they're like,
Mhm.
oh, well, they clearly hadn't had it prepared before. You can't have it fully prepared until you know exactly what's in what you're arguing against. And you can't know that until it happens. So, yes, there have been bare bones blueprints prepared, but that's about as far as you can get before you know what's actually going to go down. And
Yeah.
I think people, and I do kind of blame social media for this. I think people think the world happens instantly, and it doesn't.
Mhm.
And I mean, I think there's this incredible post on Tumblr. Let's see if I can find it. Because I've saved it like 1,200 times. is about how Republicans have been doing this for decades. To get to this point, they had to be doing this for decades. And we act like everything must be done immediately, and it can't be done immediately. Here it is. A lot of people seem to think that voting is like changing your settings in your computer. It's boring, but once you're done, and things are set the way you want it, at least until some programmer pushes an update that you can't refuse and resets everything. Quote, I did it. Why isn't it working now? Seems like to be the attitude. It's because voting isn't changing the settings. Voting is throwing stones in a river to change the course of the water. One stone isn't going to do much, and it takes time for a river to actually change course, even when you do have a lot of people throwing stones in. For the last 40 plus years, the right wing in the US has been marshaling their people into organized stone throwing teams, and they've reached the point where they've pretty much got the river dammed and ready to flood people's homes. It's going to take time and effort to A, breach the dam, and B, divert the water, and C, push the river back. But you've got to do it, otherwise they will happily flood you out of your home. And I think that is one of the best representations of politics. And this, I think, because with social media, everything is so immediate. You are seeing everything so immediately. I think that people think that's how the world works. And so they don't understand that things take time. And taking time does not mean the work isn't being done. Taking time to make things public doesn't mean the work isn't being done. I mean, I get so angry that people didn't realize how incredible the things Biden was doing were because they didn't happen fast enough. And so part of our job is to explain this is what's being done, this is what's able to be done, and this is what you don't know is happening behind the scenes, but I don't know that either. And so it's hard when people think if it's not done now, it's not going to be done, to get them to change that narrative.
Right. No, that is a perfect depiction of politics, by the way. You should send me that in like a chat thing if you can. But yes, it very much is, there's also those analogies about how, you're not marrying your politicians. It's like boarding a bus. You want to go in the direction that the bus is taking you. If you're waiting for a chauffeur to the direct destination that you want to go, you're going to be waiting there forever, and nobody is going to have the same destination that they want to go. And so, I'm thinking when we talk about politicians having to pander to and please the people, there is no way possible to please hundreds of millions of people at the same time. Like, that's not possible.
People are like, politicians have to earn my vote. I'm like, but they can't. They can't.
Especially when you keep moving the goalposts.
That would mean that they would lose. If a politician has to earn your vote, they lost. They lost the election. If you can't, you have to. It's not about earning your vote. It's about making the world better. And those things are actually mutually exclusive. You can't make someone be exactly who you want them to be and still have them have a chance to win. And if they can't have a chance to win, they don't make the world better. One thing I keep saying all the time is perfection is the enemy of progress. If you want perfection, you are never going to have progress. And like, I think about, it makes me so sad to think about 2000. It makes me so sad to think if just a handful, and they're like, oh, but Al Gore won. I'm like, yes, but if the number was more decisive, we wouldn't have been in this issue. If Al Gore had won, nothing. We would be nowhere near where we are. The environment would be one of the most important issues in the country. We probably wouldn't have passed the threshold of no return.
Citizens United probably wouldn't have been penned either.
Everything would have been different if Al Gore had been president, and all it would have taken is a couple thousand people to change their vote. People not to vote for Nader, that's a couple thousand. That's all it would have. I mean, it was
like 0.01% of people in Florida alone.
A small number. And then you think, okay, we didn't do that, fine. If Hillary Clinton had won, we wouldn't be where we are. Yeah. And then, of course, if Kamala had won, I mean, we've had so many opportunities to change the face of this country, but every time people say perfection over progress.
Yep.
And then we have no progress. And then they're like, well, I don't we have progress. I'm like, well, you didn't do the thing that would have gotten us progress. And they're like, well, it's not my fault. It's the Democrats. I'm like, but you didn't vote for the ones that would have given you the world you want.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's this punting of blame. You know, the second somebody tries to punt all of the blame, I stop thinking that they're credible. Now, if they're willing to accept some of it, but still call out another party, like I'm the type that says, yeah, I see some flaws in the way the Democrats handled some of these elections. I do think they share accountability for the way that this panned out. But I think we do too, because we are all part of the same system. So if I say it's not my fault, it's your fault, they're saying it's not my fault, it's your fault. Like if a politician were to come out and say this is all the fault of the people, I would be the first to jump down their throat and say, no, you're a politician, you have a responsibility to the people, cut that shit out. But on the flip side, for the people to say, oh, this is all on you, as if there's some separate entity that success isn't driven by the voting participation of the people, like F you too. You know what I mean? Like it's just accountability can't be this one-sided thing.
Right.
And that's another thing that brings me back to mediation, is like both sides need to accept accountability to some degree in order to, that concession of accountability goes a long way for the other side. It actually opens up the mind of the person that you're in conflict with. So if we're looking at Democrats and then we're looking at the potential Democratic voters, right? If you were to sit a representative of each of them down at a table and say, okay, where do you think you were culpable here? And where do you think you were culpable here? The second somebody concedes, you can see the body language and the demeanor of the other person shift and start to think about, okay, what are the things I could have done differently too? Like it goes a long way in trying to come up with a solution that works. If you're just punting the blame back and forth, you are never going to get anywhere.
And the other problem is that I have trouble blaming the Democrats for everything, because the second I make a post giving any of the blame to the I've automatically become one of those people. Like the way that people respond, because people only see one post, they don't see your entire story. And so I have a real hard time when giving any of the blame to the politicians, because the people won't take any of it, or because the vast majority of people won't take any of it. And so I find that it's hard to be nuanced because people don't want the nuance.
Yeah.
Which is why I post the good thing. That's one of the big reasons I post the good things, because when you post the bad things, people have a certain view of you and it perpetuates what they already think.
Right.
I do my best to, I mean, when I'm in my own house, there are a lot of people I'm really pissed off. There are a lot of politicians I could go on a whole rant about, but I'm not going to post that online because it's not spreading a message that's going to help us.
Or if it does get posted online, in the context of like, what's a call to action that we can do? Like I had a post get a lot of attention when I said, yeah, I was really upset when Tim Kaine had voted for these nominees when there's no reason why he needed to, but I will give him props for how he's contributing to this filibuster right now. There was just this really sly comment he made where he's one more story. He's like, actually 3 more stories, and you could tell he was playing on the fact that, you know, they were trying to talk for as long as possible, and that kind of thing got a lot of attention. There were even people in the comments who were just like, yeah, Tim, I was feeling a little resentful, and this makes me feel a little bit better. Like, I'm glad you participated in this. Like, I'm very much a credit where it's due kind of person, even if I criticize, but finding that balance is very hard.
But I'm someone who would basically be like, I'm really disappointed that X person did this. Now this is what you need to call them about.
Yeah.
So I'm not at any point saying this person is to blame. I'm saying we can make it better. It's on us to make it better. That's constantly my thing. I mean, you know how I end all my videos is, or most of them, the vote ones are different, but your voice is your superpower, only when you use it.
Right.
The reality is that we as citizens have more power than the Democrats right now. And if we harness that power properly, we'd be unstoppable. But and that's the problem.
That's a huge part of the problem. And I think, you know, we need to get better at not just communicating with each other, but also communicating with our electeds. Is there anything that you've come across? I know you have videos about this too, but for the sake of a podcast episode, anything that you've come across that's been particularly helpful in terms of calling representatives, emailing representatives, communicating with them, we're both from California, so our representatives are Democratic, but has anybody given you any feedback on what works best with Republican electeds too?
I mean, so one of my favorite things is Indivisible has a weekly meeting on Thursdays at 12 p.m. Pacific time, 3 p.m. Eastern time. And they answer questions and they go through the calls to action for the week. And it's about an hour 15 usually. They usually go over time. And that helps so much with what the calls to action are for the week, who we need to call about what. There's also I look at what the politicians are saying. I mean, a lot of the politicians are giving their advice. I can't think of names off the top of my head, but a lot of people will post, we don't have power as the Democrats. It's your job. We need Republicans to work with us, and it's your job to contact your Republican electeds. If you're elected as a Republican, tell them X. And a lot of what X is tell them your personal stories. Tell them how you are directly, personally being affected by what is happening. Start crying. Tell them your actual life story or your friend's actual life story. Give details. Give things that they can attach to, because the reality is there is a lack of empathy in the Republican Party, but there's also a cult mentality that is telling people to have a lack of empathy. You can't just get rid of people's empathy by saying they need to get rid of it. They still have that empathy. It may be buried, but there are things that loosen it. And hearing your personal story loosens it. And so the Indivisible is really helpful. Follow every elected official, not just the ones that are popular, not just the ones whose names you like. Follow every single elected official on every platform you have. Make sure that you have separate feeds for the elected officials. If you're on Blue Sky, you can just go to my account. I have a starter pack for senators and all their accounts, not just their official accounts. If you go to Gwen Moore, she is a representative from Wisconsin. She has 2 starter packs for members of Congress. They don't have, it does not all accounts, it's just the official account. So I will be making one myself for the non-official account, for all of it combined. But you can just press follow all. Like, it really is that important. It's important. I can't do it right now on Instagram because Instagram is not happy with me, but follow all elected officials on Instagram, because that's how you're going to know when they go live. That's how you're going to know when they have a carousel. That's how you're going to know. We have to follow them on all platforms, because unfortunately they are posting different things on different platforms. So you can't really just follow them in one place. But they are telling us what we need to be doing. You look at Chris Murphy's recent thread. You look at Rob Menendez's recent thread. These are all saying what our job is. And you can't just listen to what are they doing. We need to focus on our job. Our job is to get the Republicans, because even though the Republicans might not be telling us, oh, yes, I understand what you're saying, they are privately. They are telling each other what we're saying. They are telling Trump what we're saying. They are telling Vance what we're saying. They are telling Musk what we're saying. And we need to keep that going. And so the best tools we have is Indivisible and our elected officials. And I know people don't like hearing that, but that's the reality.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's definitely a good call to action. It's just the simple go through and follow all of your reps, not just your reps, but the reps, all of them. Every rep, every senator.
On Threads, I also have a group. I have
I saw that.
Pinned. And I'm also going to add AGs and governors. I just haven't done that yet.
AGs would be fantastic too, because they're elected.
I have that pinned. All you have to do is you have to press hold. It will come up and it will say follow all, and you can follow all of them at once. That is, you don't have to put in any work. I've done the work for you. There's nothing you need to do. Follow them all. I mean, there are so many reps. I come back to one of my favorites, who is Becca Ballant, who is at large for Vermont. And she posts videos all day long about how we can get involved, about how to keep ourselves sane and how to support our own needs, and what she's doing and all of these incredible things. And she should be as viral as Jasmine Crockett. She called herself she was at the USAID rally, I think it was, and she called herself uh tiny little powerful dyke or something to that effect. Like, she's not to be played with, but she has that voice, she has that power, but she just doesn't have the following. She could be at the same level as Jasmine Crockett, but no one knows her name. And so it's so important to follow everyone, because you're going to find representatives that you're like, wait, I thought no one was doing anything, but oh my God.
Right.
To be honest, I was in that same boat at first. One reason I started this series was for myself. I'm forced to find the good news of the day. I'm forced to find what the Democrats are doing. And then I realized, you know what? They are doing something. Like, there is no silence. They are doing the work, making noise and fighting back. And it's on us to make sure we are following them, to make sure we are paying attention to them, because they can talk till the cows come home, but they're not getting any attention for it. Who cares?
Right. That's not the way the world works anymore. You know, we're not, we play a huge role in the momentum that people get with their reach. And, you know, I've told people who didn't vote for Harris because they didn't see her policy circulated. They didn't see her stuff circulated. And I was just like, what algorithm were you on? Because it was constantly through mine. And while, yes, I could have thought she should have gone more progressive with some of those policy initiatives, it was still all well aligned in my camp of ideological thought. And I felt like, yeah, no, this is good. When she brought up the sandwich generation, that was the first time I'd ever heard a politician bring that up. Amazing. And it tore me up, because, like, I mean, that has just been my entire adult life. And the impact that would have for so many people, and just the work that I do with the Chamber of Mothers and everything else, there's so many people caught in that generation, and it's suffocating. And so I'm going, what were you seeing? And what was I seeing? And why are we living in these two different realities here? And we're not amplifying enough. It's the reach. It's like, it wasn't so much the messaging as it was the reach.
Right. So, her 80-page economic plan was on her website. You could have found it so easily. Yes. It was really easy to read. It wasn't like it was this complicated thing. It was so easy to read, but no one found it. And then they're like, well, they didn't post about it. I'm like, so you wanted them to say, go to our website and look up this 80-page economic, like, the onus is not just on other people. It is also on you. And if you need everything given to you on a silver platter, that is on you. That is something you need to work through. That is not something someone else can work through for you, because if nothing in the world can be given to you on a silver platter, there is some amount of work you have to do for yourself.
Yes. Agreed. So lastly, I wanted to talk about how to stay sane. How do we stay sane? How do we keep each other sane? I mean, we are running a marathon, and it has been 3 weeks, and it feels like 3 million years. And so the thought of going for, I don't even want to think about how long, is so daunting and overwhelming and suffocating that there have been days that I just can't get out of bed. But how do you have any self-care strategies or ways that you've helped other people just sort of try to stay sane, stay motivated, stay focused on certain goals? I think we can use all the advice we can get.
So I think for starters, you need to have a time at night that you don't look at politics, that you're done with politics. It needs to be long before you go to bed. I have a whole night routine. I go to sleep at about 1:30, but politics is out of my life by 11:30, 12. I've been listening to the Pod Meets World, Boy Meets World podcast, which is everything to me. Before I started in politics, I had a series called How to Add Queer Up to a Kids Show, and one of the pieces of that series was about Boy Meets World. So I love that show so much, and I now love the podcast is amazing. So that's what I do after hours, basically. And then I also one way that I've found to get through is modern pop culture is entrenched in our politics, in the sense that you have to worry, is this person I just became a fan of going to break my heart? Is this person going to be a bad person? Do I know whatever? I'm a fan of dead people. I spend mostly dead people. I spend most of my standard time in the 1960s and the 1970s. I watch Dick Van Dyke and Mary Tyler Moore, and I listen to the Beatles and the Monkees, and it's I do it because I love it, but I also do it because they made it. Because of what was going on then was, yes, it was worse than what's happening now. Everything that was happening during the civil rights movement, before the civil rights movement, was worse than what is happening now. And I know it's hard. And the reality, you come to that because all of the places we're trying to save, all of the US aid and all these things happened after. They happened during. They didn't exist before that. I watch What's My Line. I watch I spend most of my time in eras that most of the people that were around are not anymore. And so I can have an idol who is not alive because I know the worst thing he's done. There's nothing new that's going to come out. I have come to terms with the crap he did. I understand the time period it was in. I understand what happened with it. I still don't support it, but he's not going to break my heart any more than he already has. And that's, I think, the main thing that keeps me sane is that I was a music journalist for 5 years, and I don't know much about current music because I can't be burned like that. I spent too much time in fandoms that destroyed my life because I watched these people that I adored do the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And I don't have that anymore because the people that I am focusing on, other than Boy Meets World, which is different, but most of the things that I focus on, the people aren't alive anymore. Or if they are, they don't spend time on social media. They can't hurt me. And so it's really important to find if how you cope is fandom, if how you cope is walking into another world, to find another world that's not around anymore, to find another world that can't hurt you. And because there are people who like, oh, my safe space is, I don't know, for some people their safe space was Kanye. For some people their safe space was maybe they really was Snoop Dogg. Like their safe space, I'm trying to think of the Village People was probably some people's safe space. And like you are, or maybe DC was your safe space, and now you know about Zachary Lev. Like
Harry Potter was a big one. I mean,
Harry Potter was a huge one. Harry Potter was my safe space for a really long time. My best friend, who actually died in 2017, that was her entire life. And so it's hard for me to let that one go because she's not alive anymore, and I have nothing to connect to her other than that. And I mostly have, but like. Another one is Neil Gaiman was people's safe space. I mean, when you have a safe space of people who are still living, they can hurt you at any point. And so you have, even if it's just a small thing that you do off to the side, find something that's not around anymore. Find an obsession of people who are not alive, because go back to a different decade, and don't go back to it like, I want to live in the 1940s because I like how they treated women, or I like how they treated Black people. Like, one reason I love the 1960s so much is that they had it worse, and they get it through, and they survived, and they worked together, and they fought, and they protested, and they did all these things, and they survived, and we can too. And that is what gives me hope. Seeing the Beatles desegregate the stadium in Florida. That's such a big deal. Hearing them talk about being some of the first artists to talk about how they were fully aware that they were taking Black music, reinterpreting it, and giving it back to the world, and they gave credit to for the most part, gave credit to the Black artists that they took their music from. They were supportive of, like, and that being in that world. Okay, we're gonna be okay. We we are not the first to go through this. We are not the first to speak out. We are not the first to make a difference, and we're going to be okay because they were.
Yeah.
So if you can find something of people that are not alive anymore, or maybe don't have social media, that is my greatest suggestion for survival, is
I like that a lot. I like that a lot.
existing in a
I'm an old
space
soul
outside
too
of this
when it comes to music and stuff. So I feel you there. The Bee Gees, Stevie Nicks, Fleetwood Mac, like my husband and I hit it off over a very old soul love and obsession for music. That was just not what our peers, we met in high school, but like it was not what our peers were into. And so I feel that. I definitely feel that. And I don't think I saw the value in that way, like to conceptualize it in that way is like, yeah, you're going back in time. They can't hurt you anymore. They persevered. That's something to like fuel your momentum forward. So yeah,
and also you learn from the history. I mean, like, fine,
yeah.
like you think that this artist is the first one to do you think if you think that Billie Eilish is the first one to do the sad girl pop, go check out Karen Carpenter, go check out Peggy Lee, like learn about them, and oh my god, are their story, like you think that now is complicated, like learn their stories. They're just as complicated, they're just as dramatic, they're just as pop culture-y. There's nothing that is happening now that hasn't been done before. So find it before. Find the inception. Go to learn about these artists. Learn about the people who were complicated, who had problems, who weren't such great people, but turned into better people, or maybe didn't have a chance because they didn't live to have that chance. Like read, do things in the past. We learn from the past. You can only repeat history when you don't learn it. And so find something from history that just
memoirs.
Everyone can. Every celebrity, every culture, every TV show, everything you're obsessed with, it came from somewhere. Find where it came from and learn about it. And that way, what you are spending your time doing in focusing your attention that isn't political is not going to hurt you, is not going to affect. It can't coincide. It can't connect because it already happened. It already ended.
Yeah. No, I like that.
Passionate about it.
Yeah, no, for sure. But no, that's good. I really like how that's conceptualized because like I love history. History, either historical fiction or historical memoirs or anything else, tying it back into an older period where there was, things that we have overcome because they're wanting to bring us back to that. This is a unique era because we achieved so much. And now they're trying to drag us back to what that era was before. And like, and one of the best ways to combat that, I think, is going to be from making sure that they have to do it like by our hair kicking and screaming so that they look like the monsters that they are. We cannot comply and just march backwards at their command.
But also it's important that if we are taken backwards in certain settings, it's not like we disappear. It's not like there wasn't underground magazines talking about the world, and it's not like our world didn't exist. It was just underground. And yes, that's awful, and I hate everything about it, and I don't want to go back there. But being in the 60s and stuff and seeing how gay and trans people were treated out in the open, but then digging deeper into these artists that I'm listening to, I'm like, wait a minute. They were talking about the things we're talking about now. They just were doing it a little more subversively. Nothing's changed. The types of people in the world haven't changed. There aren't different people. There are just different people being louder. And there are different laws in place, but the people haven't changed. The information hasn't changed. Like there's so much that we have a long way to go, and we've come a long way, but they came a long way too. And just looking at how they thought things were better than what their parents went through. And like, we can survive no matter what happens. As cultures, we survive. And so from the music, TV shows, books, everything you can get from the past that informs today, and have that be your coping is the best medicine I can give. I think I'm not saying give up your favorite artist now, but see where they came from, see who their inspirations are, and see what their history is. And
You got there.
the
I love
historical
that.
fandoms are mostly less intense, because nothing that we do is going to hurt someone's.
There's not a drama. There isn't the drama.
The drama is a lot less there. So it's also better for your mental health for that way too. So yeah, that's my suggestion.
Help eliminate the drama. Yeah. I was really into memoirs for a long time, and especially the memoirs of people in time periods, you know, literally them explaining how they persevered through these time periods. And even if the theme of the memoir isn't to expose, you know, pitfalls in society and everything else, like that's not what it's designed to do. It still comes through in their writing. It still comes through in how people actually overcame, various different levels of oppression, whether it's from, you know, the government, whether it's from interpersonal connections within their family, religious, cultural, all kinds of stuff. That oppression can come from anywhere. And learning from those stories is very, very beneficial, I think. But yeah, I love that. I think that's a good way to go, especially after Harry Potter. I can't fully give up my longstanding just love for that story, you know, so I very much separated off the story from the creator of it, but it still has tainted it so much that I don't feel the same passion anymore, and it's really, really heartbreaking.
And it's ironic that the movie is more in line with our belief system than the story, because of all the actors who are so like they. Yeah. I remember my friend used to say, I hate the movies. And now for the movies to be the thing that is.
Yeah, because you've got Emma Watson in there, you've got Daniel Radcliffe, you've got these faces that have just been so opposed to.
Not all of them, but most of them.
Most of them, yeah.
People, but like,
yeah,
a lot of them have been really powerful protectors, and that's we're again, Daniel Radcliffe and Emma Watson, and
I think
they've all been really outspoken in protecting us, and that's so important. But yeah, find people who are dead.
Find people who are dead. Yeah, they can't
hurt you.
Yeah,
that's ridiculous, but it's true.
Yeah. Dead or dying, you know, where they have the least amount of opportunity.
I don't know social media.
No social media.
Could Paul McCartney do something really awful? I guess, but he doesn't really control his own social media. Could Ringo do something terrible? I guess, but he's kind of had enough opportunities at this point that I feel like, if they haven't done it yet and they're in their 80s, the chance that they're gonna do it going forward is pretty slim.
Yeah, exactly. Like Stevie came out with her Lighthouse album thing pre-election, which was talking about the overturning of Roe v. Wade and stuff like that. And I was just like, you know, she's pushing 80, right? And I'm going, you know, I feel like for you to switch at some point in your life is slim chances to none. Please don't break my heart, girl. Like,
but then you look at someone like Eric Clapton, and people are like, well, how did he become this guy? I'm like, he was racist back in the 70s. Like, this isn't new. He's been there the whole time. And like, I feel like if it didn't take COVID and it didn't take Trump, I feel like for people who are younger, that's a different story. But for people who are in their late 70s, early 80s, you're not. Be safe going back into their career and seeing who they were.
Yeah, no, for sure. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on. Please plug your handle and everything. I'm going to tag everything in the video and in the caption and everything too. But I know you're on a lot of different things. I will say to my listeners, I would go bankrupt if I subscribed to every Substack that I'm into. But hers is one of the few that like I definitely want to invest in, and she deserves it. So please consider doing a paid subscription to those platforms. You do this primarily like this is what you do.
This is what
like,
I do. So I need all the support I can get.
You need all the support you can get. Yeah.
I have a
So
buy me a coffee. I have a merch that says "My vote is my voice," and that voice is my superpower. And it's really
yeah.
like it's really soft. And yeah, so I have Instagram, I have Threads, I have Blue Sky, I have Substack, I have Snapchat, but it's been finicky with letting me post on my main page. I have YouTube, which I'm verified on YouTube, but that's where I have the least amount of followers, which is kind of funny. And I have TikTok, which is where I got my start. So yeah, my handle is ariella.elm, though in some places I think it's just Ariella Elm because it depends on if a dot is allowed on certain apps. But you can find me under that handle basically everywhere. I'm also on Reddit. If you are really dealing with the doomerism mess and want to get out of it, if you go to r/vote dem on subreddit, it's a subreddit. It is anti-doomerism. There is no doomerism allowed. It is a fantastic place to get some sanity. That is what kept me sane for the first week of this administration. So yeah, you can find me there as well. You can find me pretty much everywhere. I'm not on Twitter. That's about, or Facebook. That's about it of where I'm not. But yeah, you can find me anywhere. Send me a message, like my post, follow me, whatever you want to do. And I hope it helps.
Yeah, and for listeners who follow me to any close extent, you'll know how often I'm the one who's reposted her threads and all that stuff. Because we need this, we crave it. I know you crave it. I know all of you crave it. It's just we also seem to crave like a weird addiction, all of the outrage and the anger too. So this account is an incredibly good way to help balance that. Thank you so much for all the insight and the tips and just being able to brainstorm and get people motivated. We'll get through this.
We will.
We will.
The quote Kendrick given last night. We're gonna be all right.
We're gonna be all right. We're gonna be all right. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, everybody.